B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Tuesday, July 16th, 2019. There's a whole lot of smearing going on in America today, and it's not limited to the Twitter addict in the White House. We'll get to Trump's continuing attacks on the squad, the racism that is being unleashed, and related matters. But first, I want to talk about a smear that was initiated by CNN yesterday. And it is a remarkable piece of yellow journalism. The story is headlined, Exclusive. Security reports reveal how Assange turned an embassy into a command post for election meddling. And CNN claims that it has accessed security videos and that there were 3 different surveillance companies that were monitoring the activities at the Embassy of Ecuador in London as Assange was holed up there for nearly 7 years. And some of it is reported with mock surprise that Assange was running WikiLeaks from the Embassy of Ecuador. That is not news. But just listen to the opening paragraph here. New documents obtained exclusively by CNN reveal that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange received in-person deliveries, potentially of hacked materials related to the 2016 U.S. election, during a series of suspicious meetings at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And the weasel word potentially of hacked materials shows that they are, without any evidence, trying to frame this story. That because people visited Assange, because there were deliveries and there were hard drives that were removed from the embassy at a specific point, they are crafting a fictional account that feeds those who bought into the conspiracy theories promoted by the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, and leaders of the Democratic Party. That whole Russiagate narrative. And I want to note that Aaron Mate, who has been a critical journalist covering the whole Russiagate episode, he's agreed to do a fresh interview after Robert Mueller testifies, which is coming up on, I believe, the 24th of July next week. And so we'll get his take on these issues coming up shortly. But one of the things that is just so obvious here is that CNN takes information that has been alleged or asserted in the past. For example, that Assange, out of anger, smeared feces, human poop, on the walls of the embassy. There's no evidence for that. But CNN has moved it from an allegation to an assertion of fact. And that, of course, riddles so much of the Russiagate reporting that I've been critical of. And CNN is really hitting a new low here. And I want to recommend, I've linked to their report. You can read it as far as you can stomach it. But I encourage you to read the critical analysis written by Australian journalist Caitlin Johnstone. Her headline reads, New CNN Assange smear piece is amazingly dishonest, even for CNN. She opens, CNN has published an unbelievably brazen and dishonest smear piece on Julian Assange, easily the most egregious article of its kind since the notoriously bogus Assange Manafort report by The Guardian last year. And that was the claim by The Guardian that Paul Manafort made multiple visits to that Embassy of Ecuador in London to visit Assange. Johnstone goes on, it contains none of the exclusive documents it claims substantiate its smears, relying solely on vague, unsubstantiated assertions and easily debunked lies to paint the WikiLeaks founder in a negative light. And they note that it reports with no evidence whatsoever that while at the embassy, Assange once smeared feces on the walls out of anger, not reportedly, not claims. CNN reported it as a fact, as an event that is known to have happened. This is journalistic malpractice, and she says it isn't an accident. The incident about feces on the wall never happened. according to Caitlin Johnstone, and I think she's on solid ground in making that assertion. She goes on to say, as I had noted, that the use of the word potentially in the opening sentence of the article means that none of the documents that CNN purports to have contain any actual evidence. And at this time, there is to this day not one shred of publicly available evidence that any of the Democratic Party emails published by WikiLeaks in 2016 were, in fact, hacked at all. And we're going to get to that in our next story here in a moment. So she cites Aaron Mate's meticulous takedown of the Mueller report. And if you haven't read it yet, I will link to it in the show file for today's podcast. Hopefully, I hope to, if I remember. And it's a lengthy piece that he published a couple of weeks ago, and I find it quite compelling. So I'm not going to quote every line from Johnstone's piece. I encourage you to read it. She notes that CNN repeats the long-debunked lie that RT, the Russian network, published articles detailing the new batches of emails before WikiLeaks officially released them. And Aaron Mate, in his piece, examined the Mueller timeline and found it faulty. And that allows you to move things around and claim that things occurred out of the actual sequence of events that can be proven in a factual way. So this is something that has been addressed before, but CNN has revived this claim about RT having advanced knowledge and claiming that that's part of this Russian conspiracy with WikiLeaks. So what Johnstone writes, it's not surprising that the article contains exactly 0 of the exclusive documents, which it says validates its claims and insinuations. Nor is it surprising that CNN is using invisible evidence, which almost certainly came into its hands through a government agency to give weight to its smear. But the sheer volume of disinformation and deceit they were able to pack into one single article this time around was just jaw-dropping, even for CNN. Meanwhile, at consortiumnews.com today, Ray McGovern, the former CIA analyst and a man that I've known and trusted for over 15 years now, he takes apart the Mueller report and he asserts that Mueller's delayed testimony, now set for July 24th, the delay was to give Mueller more time to get his story straight. And this comes on the heels of new information, including a July 1st order from a federal judge, Dabney Friedrich, in Washington's Circuit Court, ordering Mueller to, in the words of Ray McGovern, stop pretending he had proof that the Russian government was behind the Internet Research Agency's supposed attempt to interfere via social media in the 2016 election. Quoting McGovern, while the corporate media so far has largely ignored Judge Friedrich's order, it may well have been enough to cause very cold feet for those attached to the strained Facebook fable. And what the judge has essentially told Mueller is that he can no longer use the assertions from his indictment of the operators of the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg as some sort of evidence that this has all been proven. She ordered the government to refrain from making or authorizing any public statement that links the alleged conspiracy in the indictment to the Russian government or its agencies. And the judge ordered further that any public statement about the allegations must make clear that, 1, the government is summarizing the allegations in the indictment, which remain unproven, and 2, the government does not express an opinion on the defendant's guilt or innocence or the strength of the evidence in this case. Now, the case relates to Concord Management. They run the Internet Research Agency. They were named in the indictment, and they shocked the hell out of St. Bob Mueller by deciding to contest it in American courts and demand their right to discovery. Now, the other piece that Ray McGovern debunks we've covered before, and that is the gross exaggeration of the impact of the IRA's Facebook posts on the American election. It is just ridiculous to imagine. And Ray uses this number, that the 80,000 Russian-origin Facebook posts represented and count the zeros, there are 8 of them here, 0.000000024 of Facebook's total content in that time. And to have a Facebook post breeze by you as you're scrolling through your news feed, most of us don't engage in 90% of the stuff that goes by. And so the gross exaggerations continue to this day, and I'm glad to see that Ray McGovern and others are still on the case. Now, I want to put some parameters around this next story, because it is based on a lawsuit that was filed yesterday related to the Washington, D.C. murder of Seth Rich. And it produces new allegations that Ellen Ratner, a woman who I know, she was her brother was Michael Ratner, the esteemed founder of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and Ellen, who I've known through liberal media since about 2004, has been running a Washington-based news service variously known as Talk Radio News. It had other names as well. And she also does some, I believe, freelance work for Fox News. Now, what is stunning here is that the lawsuit filed by businessman Ed Butowski, who at some times has been at odds with the Rich family, claims that Ellen Ratner visited Julian Assange in London on the way back from a trip she took to Berlin in the summer of 2016. And let me quote here from this story at Gateway Pundit, which I do not consider to be the most reliable source. But it's the only source we have on this because the corporate media won't touch anything related to Seth Rich. So I'm quoting now from a quote from lawflog.com. Fox News analyst Ellen Ratner relayed information from Julian Assange to Texas businessman Ed Butowski regarding Seth Rich's role in transferring emails to WikiLeaks. This is based on the lawsuit, and it's in the voice of the lawyer for Butowski. Although Ratner appears on Fox News, she is by no means a Republican or conservative. Her role in the Seth Rich saga, obliterates the Democratic narrative that right-wing zealots fabricated about Rich leaking. That the story about Rich leaking the emails was fabricated. Butowski stumbled into what they call the Russian collusion hoax crosshairs after Ratner contacted him in the fall of 2016 about a meeting she had with Assange. Ratner's brother, the late Michael Ratner, was an attorney who had represented Assange. And according to Ellen Ratner, she made a stop in London during a return flight from Berlin, met with Assange for about 6 hours at the embassy, and she says Assange told her that Seth Rich and his brother Aaron were responsible for releasing the DNC emails to WikiLeaks. And Ellen Ratner said Assange wanted the information relayed to Rich's parents to explain the motive for Seth's murder. But she was uncomfortable doing that. She gave the information to Butowski and said, well, why don't you contact the Rich family? And after some delays, apparently, Butowski did so. So in the lawsuit, it reads, on December 17, 2016, at the instigation of Ms. Ratner, Butowski finally contacted Joel and Mary Rich, the parents of Seth, relayed the information about Ratner's meeting with Assange. During that conversation, Rich told Butowski that he already knew that his sons were involved in the DNC email leak, but he and his wife just wanted to know who murdered Seth. Mr. Rich said he was reluctant to go public with Seth's and Aaron's role in leaking the emails because we don't want anyone to think our sons were responsible for getting Trump elected. And Mr. Rich said he didn't have enough money to hire a private investigator, and Butowski offered to pay for one, and Rich accepted that offer. Now, part of this was exposed in a Fox News report that was later retracted. And I can't vouch for the accuracy of this information. I'm reporting it because it's single source. It appears to be based on a lawsuit, and we will try to track down the origins of that to see if that can be validated. But I think my listeners deserve to know. that there is important speculation. And I'll contact Ellen Ratner. I bet she won't agree to go on the record about it, but I'll see if she'll speak to me and see if we can run that down further. Meanwhile, with all this going on, the person who is stranded in a federal lockup behind bogus contempt charges for refusing to testify against Assange and WikiLeaks to the grand jury, Chelsea Manning, remains imprisoned and effective July 16, that's today, the fines for her refusal to testify jumped from $500 a day to $1,000. She already owes $15,000 based on her first month of incarceration, and she could be held as long as another 15 months, and the amount could rise to $440,000. She is losing her apartment or her home, wherever she was living, and she reports that she has no personal savings and no real steady income. So how the court can consider this to be in any way fair or constitutional is completely beyond me. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And today I want to mention Elizabeth Vasquez. I turn the page for Andrew Rush, Brian Mazzy, and Stuart Russell's generous. He kicks in $10 a month. If you can do $5 or $10, I'd be very appreciative. All you have to do is visit peterbcollins.com. You click on the menu tab, then click on Become a Subscriber. You land on the sign-up page, and it's easy to choose the level of support that's comfortable for you. And if you prefer to avoid PayPal, you can communicate with me through the U.S. mail at my P.O. Box, number 150660, San Rafael, California, zip code 94915. So even before Trump launched his Twitter shitstorm against the so-called squad, I found this online from last week, and it's a report from his favorite network, Fox News. Now, it's not from Fox and Friends. I'm sure they wouldn't touch this story. But I'm quoting from a Fox News report. President Trump teed off on the news media in a bizarre Twitter rant Thursday morning ahead of the big social media summit at the White House slated for later in the day. And he was so off base that even Fox noticed that he made a huge mistake. He claimed that he rode down the escalator in November of 2016 with the person who was to become your future first lady. Well, that was in June of 2015. And the article gently corrects that, noting that the president apparently confused his dates. But in it, he kind of threatens to stay in office until he dies. He likes to tweak people with that. I think he considers it to be a joke. But he also attacked the corporate media in that same breath, saying that he's going to vanquish them and that they'll all be endorsing him one way or the other. So he lives in a bizarre kind of fantasy delusional world. And he is continuing to operate from that zone. Today, he amplified his attacks on the 4 Democratic congresswomen, saying that they hated America and that one of the 2 first Muslim women elected to Congress sympathizes with al-Qaeda. And this kind of cruelty, this is a kind of gladiator mentality, that he believes he can just say whatever he wants. He can lie about people. He can pander to the fears that his white base has of women of color and women who believe in Islam. And then he creates the idea that they're not happy in the United States because they push to improve conditions here. That's why they ran for Congress and why they serve. And so, in all caps, he tweeted, "If you're not happy here, you can leave." And then he reiterated, they're free to leave if they want. Well, Trump, you can leave too, and you'd be doing us all a big favor. I know a lot of people would joke and say, oh, well, you should go to Russia and be with Putin where he belongs. Well, I don't buy that bullshit. But he would relieve us all of a lot of stress if he took his own advice. So the squad has pushed back. They held a 4-way news conference. They condemned the rhetoric And Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, this is simply a disruption and a distraction from the callous, chaotic, and corrupt culture of this administration. And she made a point of not referring to the president by name, instead of just calling him the occupant of the White House. And Trump believes that because the racist white base of his political campaigns agrees with his mischaracterizations of these women of color. He said, it doesn't concern me because many people agree with me. All I'm saying is if they want to leave, they can leave now. But they've never said they want to leave. And, he believes that they're actually from someplace else, when only Ilhan Omar was born outside the United States. And so the Democrats have selected Tom Malinowski, former executive director of Human Rights Watch, now a congressman from New Jersey. He was born in Poland, and he has written a resolution that's focused exclusively on these ugly tweets, and they're trying to force Republicans in the House to take a position for or against that measure. And Trump claims that this is a con game and that, he wants the Republicans to stay united against it. And so this is really a new low in the ugliness of political discourse in this country. And today, Trump tweeted, "Those tweets were not racist. I don't have a racist, capital R, bone in my body. The so-called vote to be taken is a Democrat con game. Republicans should not show weakness and fall into their trap." And I heard Rush Limbaugh this morning straining to try to explain what Trump is up to. And I had my micro recorder in the car with me, and so let me see if I can play part of this back for you. Oh, wait a minute. I got to go to the beginning of this clip.
The squad is a group of enemy infiltrators.
Yeah, so the first thing that Limbaugh announced, and he claims to understand liberals better than liberals do themselves, but he said that these are infiltrators. And that is such an amazing claim, because he believes that only white Americans have legitimacy, and that these women of color are somehow others who threaten the white establishment in this country. It's quite remarkable. And then he went on to defend Trump, saying that he's the only one willing to stand up to the socialists and these dangerous America haters.
And that Trump is just the guy who's taking it on.
To turn Trump into the bad guy, they have to totally lie and misrepresent what Trump said and what he means and who he is. Never uttered a racist word.
So it's a little hard to get that ungarbled for you, but I think you get the idea. And then Limbaugh took a call from a guy named Douglas in San Diego, who very gently said, I voted for Trump and all that stuff, a lot of qualifiers. And then he said that we can do better and that Republicans should run a regular Republican in 2020 and thank Trump for his service. Now, I want to play this clip from an interview I did with Limbaugh himself back in 1992, because nobody gets on his program by accident. The calls are heavily screened, and unless Rush wanted to hear that point of view, it would not have happened.
I look at my show as an entertainment forum for people, and I screen calls to find the best call. You know what in my philosophy, you know what the purpose of a good call is on my show? It's to make me look good. I will tell you flat out, this show is not about what anybody else but me thinks. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to discover what America thinks, because it's impossible. There's no talk show host in the world who can tell you what his community or his neighborhood thinks based on what happens on his show. And so I'm not even laboring under that misconception. Calls are there to make me look good, to bring up interesting things. There's no public service aspect. There's no First Amendment aspect that I care about regarding it. And we're not looking for people who agree. In fact, we strive for people who disagree.
Yeah, right.
We'll talk more about that as we continue.
So yesterday, Joe Biden, trying to keep up with the appeal of candidates for president in the Democratic Party who embrace Medicare for all, he tried to split the loaf, split the baby. And he is still very much embedded with Obamacare, but he wants to offer a public option and throw tens of billions of more subsidy dollars at the failed concept of Obamacare. And it fails because it keeps the for-profit insurance industry in business, delivering new subsidized customers to them, and it preserves the profiteering of the pharmaceutical industry. And Biden doesn't want to get that because he gets so much money from corporate interests. And I believe that this position fails both practically and politically because it is like Hillary Clinton back in 2016, countering Bernie Sanders' very strong proposals with watered-down, middling ideas of incrementalism. And Biden believes that the moderate incrementalism is the way to take on Trump, and I believe that that is flatly a miscalculation. So the fundraising reports through the end of June have been released. Pete Buttigieg is definitely in the game. Elizabeth Warren saw a surge when she shifted to small dollar donations. Biden and Sanders are still holding on. And Kamala Harris, the senator from California who bruised Joe Biden in their first debate, scored a late rush of cash. And the big loser of the darlings of the media is Beto O'Rourke, whose fundraising has stalled, and he appears to be ready to throw in the towel. He may continue to campaign for a while, but it doesn't seem like he is getting the kind of traction. Now, I hasten to add that I don't like to use fundraising totals as the barometer for political viability, but it is a fact of life in the corrupt American pay-to-play system that we have today. And so it appears that Biden is getting the most of the max contributions, people who can write a check for $2,800 at one moment. But he also got $8 million from donors who gave less than $200, almost 250,000 contributors at that level. So it does show that he has appeal beyond Wall Street and the credit card banks in Delaware who have been his sugar daddies for decades. The governor of Puerto Rico is in hot water. His private chat messages reveal sexist and homophobic comments. And this is Ricardo Rossello, the guy who was so timid after the Hurricane Maria experience with Trump. He did kind of get a little stronger in countering Trump later, but it appears that he is facing a real backlash. In San Juan, there are protesters in the streets for the third straight day, and he called a female politician from New York who supports statehood for Puerto Rico the Spanish word for whore. He made vulgar references to pop music star Ricky Martin's gayness, and he said the mayor of San Juan, who is going to run against him next year, is off her meds, or she is a daughter of a bitch. Okay. I don't know if that's going to be fatal. And perhaps Governor Ralph Northam, the guy who got caught in blackface, but is still the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, maybe he should parachute into Puerto Rico to give some free advice to Governor Rossello. The New York Times continues its coverage of Jeffrey Epstein, and today they went at some length to expose his connections to Ghislaine Maxwell. And I raised her connection to Epstein in my comments yesterday. And she, of course, is the daughter of Robert Maxwell. He was a British publisher and press baron who raided his own company's pension funds, and he either killed himself or was quietly executed on the back of his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, named for his youngest child and one of his daughters. So after Daddy died, the Maxwell family lost its fortune, and then she hooked up with Jeffrey Epstein. And she was his girlfriend for a while, but later basically became just kind of his property manager and the woman who recruited young girls for the massages that often led to sexually predatory behavior by the alleged billionaire Mr. Epstein. So I find it interesting that the Times is willing to risk libel suits from Maxwell and from Epstein by defining this relationship and her reported facilitation of the recruitment of young girls for his debauched exploitation. But they don't touch on the issues related to intelligence, Robert Maxwell's links to the Mossad, whether Epstein, who had that secret passport under a different name with a Saudi Arabian address, and Alex Acosta, the now former labor secretary who presided over the plea deal in Miami in 2008 and who has hinted that he was told to back off because Epstein was part of the U.S. intelligence community. We await further reporting from the Gray Lady. And finally, today here in San Francisco, the good news is that federal judge Vince Shahabria did uphold the verdict against Monsanto in the case of a man who had used Roundup and who contracted non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This is the case of Edwin Hardiman, and he was awarded $80 million, including $75 million in punitive damages. Now, the judge refused to dismiss or overturn the jury's verdict, but along Supreme Court guidelines, he did reduce the punitive damages to a factor of 4x of the other damages that were found by the jury. And I'm disappointed by that, but I do accept it as the way our broken system works. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. Share it all over the place. You'll find it on YouTube.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling